Hi all, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. So we are going to see the delegations in Power app. Whoever is friendly with Power app must have received this issue, but we'll have a quick uh, introduction of what is delegation, how it works out of box, and uh, what we need to do to overcome the delegation limit. So delegation is something when you have more than 500 records out of box, and you can extend that limit up to 2000 at max to overcome that limit. But what if you have large lists like 5000, 10,000, or 20,000 records? So in that case, you will not able to get all the records to your Power App. Delegation also works out of box. Yeah. So introduction is skipped. So yeah, I'm Niren from Genpact, and here is my uh, introduction. You can reach out to me here. So these are the agendas. What is delegation, how it affects, what are the workarounds, what is the biggest challenge, and how we can overcome. So as per the Microsoft, delegation is where the expressiveness of Power Apps formulas meet the need to minimize the data moving over the network. So suppose your organization has a large number of data, hundred of thousands or millions, then moving that data from network is a challenging task. And also Power App is having cloud processing of that data, that also has limitations. So that is overall called a delegation. Power Apps will delegate the processing of data to the data source rather than moving data to app for processing locally. So as it mentions that it gets data into the bunch, it delegates a process to get next set of data to get into your Power App, and works into the bunch. By default, it is 500 records in a packet. You can, however, increase it to 2000. So that is the method, is that process to delegate, get next set of data is called the delegation. Working with large data set requires the using of source and formulas that can be delegated. It is the only way to keep your app performing well and ensure users can access all the information they need. So if you are unaware of this delegation limitation in Power App, you may come to a scenario that users come to you that, okay, my record is not visible, and then you investigate, you find that, okay, the number of records has come over 500 or 2000, and that's why it is not visible to user. So you need to be aware of delegation in Power Apps while you are creating your Power App. uh, Take heed of delegation warning that identify places where delegation isn't possible. However, while creating the Power App itself show you the warnings in formulas as well, on controls as well. On controls, it will show you a yellow color triangle, and in controls, it will show you a blue color line where the delegation warning is there. So if you are working with small data sets, fewer than 500 records, you can use any data source and formula because the app can process data locally in the formula, can't be delegated. So Less than 500 records, it does not require to be delegated. But if it is more than 500, you need to work on that. So how it affects the Canvas app? So first of all, it does not get all the records. So you always need to be conscious while creating app that are there chances in future as well to increase the records more than 500 or maybe more than 2000, which is allowable permissible limit in Power App. So that is one thing. Another thing is while you are displaying the number of count, searching records, filtering of records, and that may end up into the false data, because in your list or table you will see more records, while in Power App it may come less records. So it may give false information on Power App. Reports and charts may show wrong analytics. So if you have generated reports and charts based on that Power App data, it may show wrong analytics. So let's see how out of box delegation works in a list. So suppose I have a list which has 5,000 records. So once I go to 500 records, it will delegate next 100 records, then 2000, sorry, from 200 to 300 next delegation comes. You can see my scroll, that is next process is delegated to fetch next 100 records. So as you are going to end of the list, this scroll bar will decrease in capacity, but each time it will get next 100 set of records. So out of box list also works on delegation mode. It will not load all your data at a time. It will, once you reach to the end, it will delegate the process to fetch next 100 records. So at if first impression you go to end and say, okay, I have only 1800 records, then it is not there. It will show you next 100 until it reaches the end. So it is out of box. How it works in SharePoint list as well. And what are the workarounds while creating Power App? So there are certain ways you can create the same amount of your screen, your form, your app using SPFX, or using Power App. You can use common data services. You can call up Azure function, or you can work on a Power Automate. Here I have shown you two images here for common data service and Power Automate, using which you can get large data set queries and records using the Power Automate and common data services. So using that, you can get data into your Power Automate. So then what is the challenge? The challenge is most of the organizations don't allow users to have full access on their portals and local machines. So security policy always comes. Uh, uh, Sometimes user do not get local admin rights to run VS Code or some tools to create SPFX solutions or something like that, install Node.js. Or then if you want to create the Azure function using PowerShell or C Sharp, then also you need Azure admin rights. Then also it is hard to get the Azure admin right on your tenant, because it risks the data or permissions. uh, Admin access to use Power Automate tasks. So you need certain admin access on your tenant to access the few of the Power Automate activities. So if there is no option available for you to overcome these recommended tools to be used, uh, SPFX or Common Data Service or Power Automate, then what you can do to overcome this delegation? So there is a way that I'm going to share with you, but it is not always that recommended way, because as and when your records increases, the performance may degrade, because as we have seen that Power Automate processes data locally and fetches the data through network. So as and when your records increases, the performance of that Power Automate to process the data may decrease. But there is a way. So let's see the demo. So this is the direct list demo. You can create a grid like view using the gallery control in your app. And here I have bind the direct list, one of the list we have seen previously, this one, to that gallery control. As like this list, the app will also perform as per the delegation. So if I go to, and it will get next set of records. So if you bind your gallery control directly with the list, it will out of box perform on delegation until you reach the end of the list. It will be interesting to see the code. So here it is just binded to the list. So what if I have to get data from multiple lists in one gallery? Yes, I can always do that. Clubbing the multiple lists into one collection and getting the data. So if you check, here is my collection, and on loading of the screen, I have clubbed data of two lists into one collection. But here also the delegation will come into our path. So if you go to the next screen, here you will be able to, you will observe that after 500 records, it stops getting next record from 501. See, list 2, 500 records are over. For that list, the delegation limit has reached. And as club with next list, it gets that list 500 records. So overall, I can get only 1,000 records out of 10,000 records. My two lists have 10,000 records altogether, as you can see here. Correct? So that is how it it is required that you always be aware of delegation limit, because once you give a search based on this, you generate a report, you give a total number count, it may end up like that. My rows are not there, my data is not perfect. Why I miss I'm not able to see the records. So while developing, you should be always aware of delegation limit, while clubbing also and binding also. So how we can do that? To do that, let's go to list once again. Here I have added one ID value column which is a number type, and you can see it is same as out of box ID value. Why I need to do that is this out of box ID value column is auto populated, but it is not delegable. To make your list delegable, you need similar ID value that we will describe how why you need that later when we will go, but how you can populate this. So to populate this, you can simply create a Power Automate. Currently I will make it off, but a simple Power Automate, whenever an item is created, you just update that item with the ID, and that will update your ID value with that ID, and that will be straightforward. Now, why to create this Power Automate separately? It is always recommended you create a separate two-step Power Automate, because if your data is very heavily coming to the list, suppose hundred of records, thousand of records are added in a particular office time into your lists, then it may end up that your flow initiation or instances of your flow may get into running state forever, and you have to go once again to cancel all the running states and run the flow to update that ID value. So this ID value in your list, this ID value in your list is very important to get all the records, because based on that we are going to make the batches of the records to fetch. So now let's dive into the solution here. So into this list, I am going to club all the 10,000 records into my gallery. So when I run and click on load data, it will start getting data into 500 batches, and it will load all my data till both the lists are ended. So I get full 10,000 records in my gallery, and here you can check. So nearly list to 5,000 records are there. And then list one, 5,000 records. So both the list with 5,000 records are being loaded to the gallery. So how this is done? To achieve that, we have calculated the minimum ID value and maximum ID value of both the lists. So first I will get the first list maximum ID value and minimum ID value by arranging them into de de descending and ascending orders. Again, I will get maximum ID value and minimum ID value of both the list in descending and ascending order to get the minimum value of ID and maximum value of ID. Why this is needed is because I need to know that for 500 records, how many batches I will require to process. Because again, the Power App has a limitation to iterate 50,000 times. So if your iteration is more than 50,000 times, it is again a limitation in Power App. So you need to make sure that whatever your minimum and maximum ID value and you divide it by 500, that should not increase more than 50,000. So from getting that minimum and maximum IDs, you I have two lists. So I have to find from those two maximum values and minimum values, again which one is minimum from out of those two and which one is maximum, because I want a range from both the list. Like sometimes what happens is one of your list is regularly shifting your records to archive. Now starting a list always from ID 1 is not recommended, because suppose my first 500 records are moved to archive, then it is useless to get that iteration into process, because it will overhead to a process. So that's why it is always recommended to calculate from minimum of all the lists and maximum from all the lists. So you get the minimum and maximum from lists, then you have to initiate a collection of sequence. So your collection of sequence will get minimum and maximums differentiation by 500 records. Now this 500 is I have put because my settings in Power App is 500. So if you have increased your setting, suppose you have millions of records or tens of millions of records, then you come to a situation where you need to have chunks of 100 or 1500 or 2000 records. Then you have to put that thing over here. So currently it is 500. I also recommend that more than 500 records, it will make your performance slow, because processing that number of records, Power App will take so much of load. But 500 is fine. You can get the bunch of 500. Initially, what is the calculation is, so 50,000 is the limit of my iteration, and if I multiply it by 500 records per iteration, then I think up till 2,050,000 records you are good not to increase that limitation. So that is fine. uh, Once you reach over 2 million records, then you start increasing your limitation. Then for all my loop IDs, so if you want to see this sequence collection, you can see that what happened to my sequence collection loop ID. So see 500, 100, 1500, top 5 are shown, rest are not shown, but you can imagine that I am creating a batches from 1 to 500, then 500 1 to 1000, then 1001 to 1500, and so on. So that will be initiated into this collection. Then for all that collections, I am getting the previous threshold and next threshold for that limitation. So this will be 1 to 500. Now, why this which loop? Because into for loop, you cannot update your variable. into your for loop, a variable updated will not take effect, and you cannot write a simple sentence. So that's why you need this with sentence to get exact numbers with your batches. Then you simply just collect your data into collection, where you put condition that id value. Now here id value comes into the picture, because out of box id column of list is not delegable. So when id value is greater than or equal to 1 and 500 for first iteration for both the list. Similarly, it will come to next iteration from 501 to 1000. That's like that. You will get all your records into the collection, and that collection is binded to your gallery. So that's why it is doing this magic. Once again, another 10,000 records. Sorry, I need to restart it. And then if I can start. So once the collection was filled with data, you need to restart your app from start. Otherwise, it will append to that connection. Sorry, but I need some. Initially no records, and then you can load all the records using that logic to get 500 chunks each time and binded into your gallery. See here also for 10,000 records, it is almost taking 20 seconds, 15 to 20 seconds. So consider if you have into 10 number of records for each time, 10,000, then 100,000, yeah, then million, then your time also will increase in exponential way. So that's why I told that it is not always recommend to use this approach, but yes, for fewer number of records you can always use this approach to get out of box records into your power app. So I think yes, that's it. If somebody would like to once again go through the code, first max id and main id of both the lists, then maximum and minimum from both the list. So you will get entire range of both the lists. Then you sequentialize how many chunks you want to process using the sequence command, and then for all those chunks loops you get the previous threshold and next threshold, and then you using that value in your condition based on id value, you get this. So I think that is pretty simple logic, and you can always get it done. So that was the demo how you can overcome. Any questions?
Thanks, Niren, for this informative contents. Let's. If anyone have any question, then please ask. Think, I think there is no question, but I have some question. Can we implement paging over here instead of this loading numbers?
Yeah, actually, you can always implement paging.
Yeah.
Uh, Paging is totally different from delegation. Once you get all the data, then how to show it into your gallery, that is how you can implement a separate logic of paging on your gallery control. But yes, you can implement paging, you can do searching and sorting, you can filter records, anything you can do. Once the chunk of data has arrived, then you can perform anything on that.
Okay, thank you. I have another question also.
Yes.
Is there any limitation to we can load maximum data like a 1 lakh, 2 lakh records?
I have experience up to 4 million records. You can load up to 4 million records, but again, it will decrease your performance. So it is not always recommended. But if there is no option to develop any other thing like SPFX or Azure function or common data services, then I think you can go by this way. But you always have to inform your client or your teammate that it is going to decrease.
Okay, we have one question from Disha.
How
How?
to avoid delegation for filtering large data sets? Yeah, actually, try to give a filter condition, Disa, which will give you chunk of smaller data. Like suppose I do have to put a condition over here with this thing that where title is starting with something ABC, then you consider first of all that which condition will give me small chunk of data. If my filter condition with ABC is giving me small chunk of data, then that condition I will try to put into the inner loop. So here I will try to give another filter. So based on this, your delegation will not come into the path. So whenever you have multiple filters, don't I would recommend don't give all into the end condition. Instead of try to give multiple filters, that will give you more faster result. And if you can remember, if somebody is from old school, putting a SQL query largely with so many joints will always degrade your performance. While you use the sub queries, it will increase your performance. So that same logic applies over here also, that whenever you have filtering large data set with multiple conditions, yes, you can always do multiple filtration. Is the same limitation applies while searching, or how search function will work? Yes, same limitation applies with searching also. Searching and filtering both can be used together. Uh, uh, if you create a 3 screen app out of box, that will help you to understand how you can work delegation with searching as well. In what scenarios use case we need choose between SPFX and Power Apps? Yeah, good question. Uh, so that is always recommended that when you are dealing with large records and you have ample permission to create SPFX and deploy to it, you always go with SPFX. It is the faster one. It is on page level, so that will not increase the load on your processing. If you don't have any options left like common data service, SPFX, Azure function, then only go with this approach. If there are more than 500 records, will row count give the exact count, or it will show the number set from max record setting in Power Apps? Sorry, I need to reread it.
Riaz here. So suppose if we have a SharePoint list having 5,000 or 10,000 records, so the
No, no.
row.
Actually, this row count is count of the gallery control. I have not shown you the maximum records. Sorry if I have not. So see, how many records will be binded to your gallery will be shown over here. So I am clubbing two list with 5,000 records each. So it will show me 10,000 over here,
Yeah,
right?
okay.
So it is not showing you the maximum id of the list. It will show number of rows banded into your gallery control.
Okay.
Uh, Niran, I have one question. You use ID underscore val column.
Yes,
So I don't get the idea of it. Why?
exactly.
Because
uh,
we have a ID column.
yes,
Then why you use that? Can you explain me?
yes, that is what I tried to explain. Let's go into that dive once again. uh, so this one, right?
Yeah.
This out of box id column is not delegable. So if I could have used into my formula id column over here in condition, it would not have allowed me. So to get exact replica of that, I have added a number column, and to populate that, I have created a simple flow where on updating of the list, it will update my ID column value.
But in that case, if sorry, but in that case, if some record are deleted between records, which I
Yeah,
have.
that is see, that is why we need ideal to id column, because if some of the records are deleted, it will skip those records into id. Suppose my 200 to 400 records are deleted, so for my first chunk it will get the ids which are only 300 ids are there. Instead of 500 chunk, it will get me 300 chunk in the first iteration. So it will never increase out of the 500 records at any point of time due to the maximum and minimum IDs set to threshold.
Thank you. Uh, is any question? I think there is no question. Okay. Thank you, Niran, for this information. And it's right. I mean, good session. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks all.